while you are incarcerated on a felony conviction, that 48 out of the 50 states take away your rights just to vote. According to Voting as an Ex-Offender by nonprofit.org, founded in 2005. The only states that do allow felons to vote are Maine and Vermont. For many years now, there have been um, a constant debate on if felons should have the right to vote. And on debate.org, published in 2013, they asked if felons around the world should have the ability to vote. 53% of them said no for many different reasons. I am credible to talk about this topic because I've been doing extensive research for a couple of weeks now. I've also accumulated information dealing with the different regulations and rules that felons have on them. I believe that nonviolent felons should have the ability to vote because they are still considered citizens by the government and they are protected by the Constitution. Prisoners should have the ability to vote because since they are protected by the Constitution, their rights should be actually abided by. Like first, well, now that I've talked about that, I will talk about how prisoners are still considered citizens by the government and what they mean, and if they were allowed to vote, what that would mean as far as elections and laws and stuff like that. Then I will talk about how the United States are currently denying prisoners their constitutional rights. Then finally, I will talk about how prisoners should go about voting. First, I will talk about how prisoners should be able to vote because they are still considered citizens. Therefore, persons who is incarcerated on felony charges should be allowed to vote as long as the charges are non-violent felony convictions. In fact, in the Wyoming article, Wyoming Lawmakers Way Giving Nonviolent Felons the Right to Vote by Laura Hancock, written May 14, 2014, states that the Committee of the Wyoming Parole Board are considering giving non-violent felons the right to vote instead of having to wait the 5 to 10 years that they would normally have to wait after being released from prison. And with this law being passed, it would then take off all the responsibility off this parole board, and then would be the pressures would be relieved. If prisoners were allowed to vote, there would be a significant increase in the United States alone because of how many incarcerated persons that we do have here. It would benefit more people for voting and laws would be made. People would participate in elections more. A tremendous difference in our lives would be made as we know it. One possible way our lives would change is by the fact that laws would be passed that would look out for the people's best interests. I just talked about the fact that prisoners should have the ability to vote because they are still considered citizens, and now I will talk about how the United States has been depriving prisoners the right to vote for years now. By depriving prisoners the right to vote, they are being denied their constitutional rights. According to distinguished midnight professor Christopher Eugen of psychology, stated in article Lockout, Felon Disenfranchisement and American Democracy, published in 2006, founded on felon voting pros and cons, says, when denying prisoners the right to vote, it determines the respect of the rule of law. Allowing prisoners to vote, by contrast, may strengthen their social ties and commitment to the society. Therefore, the common good will be served, thus promoting legal responsible participation in the civil society. If we allow prisoners to vote, it would strengthen their social ties to the society and would give them a feeling of emplacement as they're part of the community. By 48 of the 50 states denying prisoners their right to vote, it is a direct violation of the 15th Amendment that we have in our Constitution, which states that the right of the citizens in the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States by any state on free account of race, color, or previous conjunction of servitude, meaning that um, the states cannot deny their citizens their right due to what they've done in the past, such as like the run-ins with the laws and felony convictions. Now I have talked about the United States for generations on how the United States have been denying prisoners their basic constitutional rights, um, for years. Now I will suggest how nonviolent felons should go about voting. Here are some suggestions on how nonviolent um, felons could go about voting. They can go about voting in doing what we call an absentee vote. According to registertovote.org, published in 2011, it states that for one to be able to conduct an absentee vote, they would have to contact their local election officials to request an absentee ballot application. Once they receive that application, they will then um, vote with their state, and their vote will be cast into that state's election. If prisoners were able to vote through this means of voting, it would allow more jobs to be created in our economy by people having to go drive there, pick up the different ballots, and it would also produce more jobs in general, even though it would be seasonal. Now that I've talked about how non-violent felons should go about voting, now I will conclude my presentations to say that since the Constitution prohibits states from denying citizens their right depending on race, colors, or previous conjunction of servitude, um, the person should have the ability to vote. First, I talked about how felons are still considered citizens of the United States. Then I've talked about how the U.S. has been denying prisoners of their ability to vote and how they are a direct violation of the Constitution. Then I talked about how prisoners could go about voting. So now I hope that by hearing my case that you are more inclined to give felons their ability to vote. Thank you.